Welcome, everybody, to the Creative Masterclass at Digital Hollywood in partnership with CES 2021. We are here with a remarkably fascinating group of people, and we're going to be talking about the aspects of creating television in a post-COVID world. I'd like to introduce you to Marta Kaufman, Robbie Tolan, Mark Guggenheim, and Peter Murrieta. I'm Catherine Clinch, and I'm going to be your moderator today. So I'd like to start by asking you, what were you all working on when the industry shut down?
We were on episode 5 out of 16 of Grace and Frankie. Literally in the middle of the episode, we stopped.
What about you, Mark?
The day before shutdown, I was driving home from the mix stage for the playback of the first episode of television I directed. And it was actually like the last thing I had to do. Like, I was, Arrow, the other show I was working on, had wrapped. I was finished. I was done. It was like literally like the moment, it was like the universe sensed that I was completely done with my outstanding homework, because the next day, boom, locked in the house.
Wow, Peter?
I must have the same angel that Mark does, because the week before we had locked and finished all the mixes for Mr. Iglesias season 2, and I was on a ball field watching my college senior play what we thought was the beginning of his senior baseball season, when it all kind of just got locked down. And I remember thinking I had just, again with an angel on my shoulder, sold a feature to DreamWorks. I'd never done an animated feature before in my life, and they had told me like a week before, like, get ready for like just 8 months of just you alone typing. And so I remember getting on the plane in Florida and going like, well, I guess I know what I'm going to be doing.
Robbie?
I work with Marta on Grace and Frankie, and we pretty much had a torturous day because it was just one day in, I think, with productions trying to sort out whether or not they should shut down. And we pretty much tortured ourselves all day trying to sort out when and if, and it wasn't yet an edict. So it was really emotional for the crew, the cast, and for all of us.
But we do have kind of extraordinary circumstances with 4 cast members who are not youthful. No, they're youthful. They're not young.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very high risk thing. Well, while the angels were on your shoulders, they were not on mine, because I had just gotten hired to rewrite on a series pilot. And as soon as that happened, I started counting all of your stuff day by day, realizing how it's not going to get made because of your backlog, which I absolutely admire. So how much did the shift affect or modify your creative process when you had to go to Zoom rooms?
Well, I have to say, Zoom rooms I find them to be intense in a different way than a writer's room is, because you're face to face. You don't even get to really read body language. You don't get to, in a room you can get up and go get some peanut butter, and but people don't sort of walk away from their Zooms very often. So we found that we had to work in shorter periods of time and take more breaks. But it definitely slowed down the process for 2 reasons. One was, it was very difficult to imagine into the future of our characters when we didn't know what the future was going to look like. And the other was that it was a Zoom room. And then that's just less fertile of a place.
Mm-hmm. Peter, how about you?
What I've been in since then have been note sessions with studios on the DreamWorks feature. I have a pilot at Amazon, and so I've been in development with them, and also punch up of friends' shows. So I haven't had the day-to-day Zoom experience in terms of the writing world. But I will say that all the things Marta says is right. And I also am a professor at Arizona State.
Mm.
And what has been a gift is during the spring and then in the fall, it was much easier for me to call friends of mine and say, will you please come guest lecture, and have students who are undergraduates get to experience 20, 25 minutes with some amazing people. And so there's been that byproduct of it. But I would ask the question to the panel of like, do you think, I feel like the studios are going to want us to stay on Zoom. I think they love not having to pay for our lunches and our offices. And I think it's going to be a fight.
It's going to be a fight.
Yeah, I think it is going to be a fight. And I think it's something that, look, we'll see what happens after the pandemic, but I think it's something that the Guild is going to have to get into because it is not the best way to work.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Not for production at large either, just to be sequestered and not have any kind of human contact, especially in such a collaborative business, just doesn't seem conducive to really good writing or good producing or anything.
Yeah, just because you can get home on your spare tire doesn't mean that you want to replace all 4 tires of your car with spares.
Right?
That's right.
I
Well, what
think
about a hybrid model? Do you anticipate any of that?
It depends on what that looks like. We're going to have to see. I mean, a hybrid model, does that mean anything from 2 days a week you're in the room and 3 days a week you're on Zoom? Or does it mean, it just depends on what that means. And it's not quite like schools who are going and who were doing a hybrid model, and that was more about rotating students.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know quite how you do that in a writer's room.
Well, I'm all for a hybrid model, mainly because like of 1 day a week, just to keep us all out of our cars. Because I got to tell you, from personal experience, fighting traffic when your cars just have spare tires on it is really bad. But that's a joke. But mainly, like, I do, the plus side of this is I like the fact that I'm not stuck in my car, for all day. So maybe there's a world where, either 1 day a week we're all on Zoom, or because the studios probably don't want to pay for office space that way, maybe we're sharing office space. If you're working on a show for a pod or a production company, you cycle it, and it's maybe it is 3 days on, 2 days off, but you've got a sister show that is cycling with you, so that that office and the office staff are still being put to work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the hybrid for me would be to do pre-production together. I feel like you get so much done, so many gifts just arrive.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
You wander the lot together at lunch, and I just think that a lot of great things fall out. And then once production starts, once the avalanche is falling behind you, like, I think you can easier see like, oh yeah, well, we'll have the room in on these 2 days to do punch up and fix what's going on next week. And I think you can figure that out if they told us we had to.
I think it depends on where you are in a season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you have written most of the episodes or all of the episodes and you're just punching up, I think you're absolutely right. That's the way to do it. But we write as we have a pre-production period, but then when production starts, we're still writing.
Right.
So that would be a more difficult way to do it for us. Although I think production meetings could be virtual.
Yep.
There's no reason they can't be. I think, casting can be virtual. Not my
editing.
favorite way to do it, but it can be done.
Mhm.
Yeah, post can be, you know,
Right.
The only thing in post that worries me is the mix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you. And color timing. You
Yeah.
know, mixing color timing, you've got to be, you know, you've got to be there. Just
Yeah.
that.
yeah.
It's all
But
about the quality of this.
the editing phase, it's already feels like that's mostly what I was doing anyway, editing.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Tricky.
So has all of this changed any of the way that you look at how a writer performs? Because you're not in the room, there's less personality, there's more focus on what they're doing. Has that changed any perception?
For me, it has. I mean, I think there are great writers that just can't focus,
Mhm.
and that has become more of an Achilles heel.
Right.
You know, if you're doing stuff, I noticed in the couple of the punch-up rooms I was in, eventually the friend was like, "Hey, we're gonna take a break, and you know, I just need these four people to stick behind." And I don't think it was the four people that were landing the most stuff. I
Mm.
think it was four people that recognized that rhythm that comes from a room sometimes, which is about bits and side chatter, that's just not conducive.
Mhm.
Yeah. I judge my staffs by how tall they are, and Zoom has been a real impediment to that.
And I judge people by their pants.
Oh, see, there you go. See, another problem.
I get it. I get it.
So
Well,
I
I've been wearing shorts for the last 7 years, and several people texted me during the beginning of the pandemic to say we had no idea how fashion forward you've been.
So I want to move into what I'm going to call the eternal sunshine of the Spotless series, hit series. Marta, you created Friends, which became a global cultural phenomenon. And then you created Grace and Frankie, which showed people that older people don't have to be scary, and is one of the biggest hits on Netflix. What vitamins do you take? How do you put together a series? What is your process?
You know, I wish I could give you a formula. I wish I could. There is no formula. The only thing I can say that connects those two projects is that they are characters you'd love to be around and you want to invite into your home. It's funny, but it's also warm. It's like it's comfort food like. So, I mean, and that is not to say that all hit TV shows need to be that. That's just what I have found works for me as a writer and a producer.
What about the rest of you? What is it about a series that you can create that makes it sustainable? Because all of you have long-term series under your belts.
Well, I'll say, because I think I only have one. Mark can go next because he has several. But for me, I feel like being 54 and being Mexican American means I was working in TV when it wasn't necessarily about finding Mexican Americans to work in television.
Yeah.
And it's always been my agenda. And so when I had an opportunity, never done a children's show before in my life. I was working for Kelly Ripa on her show when the Wizards thing kind of fell in my lap. And my approach there was, it was a white family. I asked Disney because I had capital because they wanted to work with somebody from prime time. And I was like, I want it to be a blended family like mine. And I want to do this and I want to do that. And I just asked for a bunch of stuff. And then I asked for Selena. And, I kind of kept going until somebody started to realize, why are we saying yes to this guy so much? And then I think I just kept my nose down and I hired people that I'd worked with on prime time. And we wrote a show that didn't talk down to anybody. And I think the result was, we had those ratings and those 3 Emmys and the big movie. And I think that came from us not talking down to our audience. And I think that goes everywhere, not just kids. I think there's a lot of shows that do that I flip on and I go, oh, I don't want to hang out with them. As Marta said, I don't want to hang out with that person.
Mark?
Well, yeah, it's funny. I'm so divorced from my own process. I can never talk about it. I have no idea. I'm with Marta. There's no sort of formula, and I'm also with Peter in the sense of like, when I did Troll Hunters for DreamWorks Animation, I had never done an animated show, and I had never done a kid show, and I'm like, I'm just going to write this the way I would write any other show, because not because I thought that was the best way to do it, but because I didn't know how to write any other way. And I think that's a long way of saying to the extent there is a formula, it's following your gut and trusting your gut and defending your gut to all the executives and actors and producers who are gonna try to steer you off that course.
Yeah, we all work too hard to not feel passionate
Absolutely.
about what we're working on.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel passionate, it's never going to become something.
Yeah. It's hard enough. It's hard enough to do when when you are passionate. I can't imagine doing it if you're not passionate. Like, then why are you doing it? It's not.
I'll be vulnerable and say it, and maybe you all will back me up, but I also know in my career, I've sold pilots and been in the middle of writing them in December that I'm not passionate about, and I know it. And when you get the call that they're not making it, and you're like, yeah, right. And so I think the looking at the IMDb page of what we've made that is on the air, there are those projects we know it's so and so said it was going to be a lock and a layup, and this person and that person, and then you're like, what am I doing?
Yeah, I'll back you up on that.
Yeah.
Very early on in my career, I took a job for the money. And it was because my oldest had just been born. It was a 20-minute commute. And in Los Angeles, a 20-minute commute is better than $20 million. And the funny thing is, I originally turned it down. And I kept turning it down to the point where then they just like threw money at me. And I'm like, I've got to do this. I lasted 4 months. I was miserable. It was a horrible experience. Today, the showrunner would be, would be drummed out of the business for being abusive. It's just, it was good to learn that lesson early on. Don't ever take a gig for the money. You will always regret it.
You made me laugh, Mark. I turned down a job because of the commute. I went to a meeting.
That makes total sense.
Years ago, I was like a hiatus job. They wanted me to go to Activision, way out, like,
oh yeah,
past. And they were like, hey, we're doing a new Tony Hawk game and you used to skate, and can you write these cut scenes? And I was like, that sounds cool. And so I called my agent on the way home and I was like, so where can I work from? I work from home, right? And they're like, no, they want you there for the game designers every day. And I was like, all right, never mind.
You know what's funny, man? This hiatus after this horrible show, I got an offer to work on a video game at Activision, and I commuted. I was living close there, so yes. I took the gig for the opposite reason you turned it down, which is it was close, and it was fantastic. Actually, it was really awesome to be able to be there with the programmers and the developers and the artists. But yes, I'm all about picking jobs for the commute. That's important. That's a factor we should really discuss because it's a big part of the passion.
People outside of Los Angeles don't understand.
No.
How far is it? And you go 45 minutes. They have no clue. And I want to ask you, Robbie, you came from a background of being a film editor. So how does that inform the way that you create projects?
Well, way back when I started in post, I think what it does is it lets you know ultimately what you're going to need. And then, what kind of shots you're going to need, what kind of performance you're going to need, how you can overshoot, over-direct, and that's its own sort of nightmare. But ultimately, what are the important beats of a story? And then I think you just sort of develop a sense of timing, about when you're in post, how long or short, or what builds a moment, or what makes something funny, what makes something super emotional. And that's just sort of inherent, I think, in the process, because was in film editing when it was film before video. So, you know, you had like little tiny trims and 16 millimeter film. And I just think it was a really good lesson in terms of storytelling. And then from there, I just sort of started the producing route, knowing what I ultimately was going to need later.
Peter, something you mentioned about writing when nobody was looking for a Latino writer. A lot of your projects seem to focus on Latino characters and Latino communities. Is that by design now?
Yeah, I went to Ojai for this conference when I was represented by CAA before we fired them all.
Mhm.
And there was a woman who was Anita Hill's college roommate. And she was seated next to me at a table for dinner. And she said, let's go around and all introduce ourselves. And I said, okay, you know, and then we got to me and I said, Peter Marie, I'm a writer and executive producer. And she said, nope, that's not who you are. And I was like, okay, you know, and she said, I looked you up. You've been about putting brown people in front of the camera and behind the camera for over 20 years. Like your resume says it. It's not just here's a thing with some bullet points on it. And if you don't start off every introduction by saying that, then you're not doing it right. And so, you know, my mom told me to always listen to strong ladies who go to church all the time. So I've been listening to her since then. And it is an agenda now because, you know, we just can't wait anymore for permission and for these people to think about it, you know, and I don't mind being very forceful about it either. I know that in July, CBS said they were going to make 25% of their shows and pilots were going to be that. And I don't think they've hit that number. I know from my friends that have pitched and stuff that have gone on there, they're not near that number, but you know, we got to keep pounding away.
Right.
So I want to talk about partnerships because Mark, I have heard Greg Berlanti call you his second brain.
That's very sweet of
So
him. I should pay him some money, but he already has he has all the money that Marta doesn't have.
So that kind of partnership is unusual and it's clearly successful. So how did that come into being?
That's a good question. Well, the way it really came into being was he had developed a show called Jack and Bobby with my friend Vanessa Taylor, and Vanessa thought I'd be good for the show, and she got me a meeting with Greg, and Greg hired me. And I don't, you know, when we had the meeting, I don't think it was a particularly it wasn't a great meeting, it wasn't a bad meeting. It was good enough to get me hired, but that was about it. But during the year we did Jack and Bobby together, it just became very apparent that Greg and I we had a lot of similarities. We shared a lot of the same sensibilities. But I think the key to my collaboration with Greg, for as much as we have in common, we also have different ways of seeing the world. And so it's in both those things. It's in the synergy and in the differences where I think the real sort of magic happens. But it's also there's something really to be said. I mean, I've been working with Greg now for over 15 years, and there's really something to be said for that amount of experience. And we just we get on the phone or we get on the Zoom now, and there's a shorthand because he knows me about as well as my wife does, and I know him about as well as his husband does. And that's a really great thing. I'm really blessed to have that kind of long-standing relationship.
Peter, do you have any kind of partnerships like that?
A few, but not that well. I would say that the longest standing partnership I have is with my wife, who I met at Second City. We were both actors there. And she's always been my first reader. She's always been my best editor. And this past year, speaking of trying to make Latin content, I got a call from Mario Lopez because Gabriel Iglesias told Mario, how well I treated him. And Mario said, "Hey, Lifetime's never done a Latinx holiday movie. Will you write it?" And I was like, "That is not my game.
Mm.
That is not my game, brother. But let me think about it." And so he called me again, and I said, "I'll write it if I can write it with my wife." And so we wrote it. Had no idea they would shoot it. Came on in like one of their prime spots in November, and it did like double the numbers they usually do, and it got good reviews, which I think some of those movies don't usually get good reviews. And so she and I are going to do another movie together, so that's a partnership. And I'd say professionally, Kevin Hench, who I did Christella with, and I did Mr. Iglesias with, is like that. It was like Mark's describing. I think our first meeting went 90 minutes. And I remember Becky Clements coming in midway. She was the producer. And she was like, "How's it going?" And he said, "Well, we're still talking about the Red Sox. I promise we'll start talking about the show soon." And he's been like an hermano, just a guy who gets me and I get him. And like Mark said, very different personalities and lives, but creatively we get each other.
You know, I had, I've had several partners over the years. David Crane and I were partners. We wrote musical theater together. We were together for 27 years.
Wow.
He was my other husband. We finished each other's sentences. I think the worst thing we ever said to each other was "fine." That's as bad as it got.
Mhm.
And now I have Robbie as a partner, and it's a whole different partnership, and it's fantastic. Robbie is a producer through and through, but she also has great creative instincts. And we actually met. We were both on the board of our children's school, and we started putting together these gigantic musical theater fundraisers. They were crazy. And we said, finally, you know what? Let's do something where we can get paid. And we started working together, and it's been such a dream, in a company of all women, with, as you were saying, the same sensibilities and the same passions, and we balance each other out.
I want to go a little further on that, Marta, because you and I are in the same cohort. I think I'm a year and a half older than you. And in the 80s, the conventional wisdom was if you wanted to be successful and work your way up, you had to partner with a man. And William Morris was constantly telling me, "Go find a man, go find a man, go find a man." And I kept trying to do that and nothing clicked. And gradually I saw that I hit a point, it didn't work. And I've talked to a lot of women who have hit that point. So do you think that's pretty much the best door for women in those
No,
days?
absolutely not. I don't. I mean, I think it was, no one ever said that to me.
Mhm.
I never heard that. But if I had, I probably would have bitten someone's head off. So it was probably smart that no one said it to me.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, I had experienced plenty of misogyny. You know, David Crane and I would go into a room to pitch something, and the people would only look at him.
Yeah. Mhm.
I'd certainly experienced that. However, I don't think it's because I had a male partner. I think it's because I had the right partner, and we were able to, you know, create friends together,
Mhm.
that made it what it was. But I know, and look, believe me, I know there was plenty of misogyny back then. I certainly experienced it. But I never had anyone say that to me.
Okay, let's talk about casting. Peter, on Mr. Iglesias, did you start with Gabriel or did you start with the character and then find Gabriel?
No, that was a vehicle for Gabriel. And there had been many iterations. There'd been like, he runs a garage, he does this, he does that. And when he said to us, oh, he was talking about a teacher that he really loved in high school, and how if he hadn't become a stand-up comic, how he thought because he was a good public speaker that he would be a high school teacher. And so that's where that genesis came from. And the characters around him were the ones we made.
And what is it when you see someone that makes you decide they should have a show?
Well, that gets into the politics of race again. But, you know, Gabriel is a top 10 comic. He makes between 20 and $30 million a year.
Huh.
He makes more than Chris Rock.
Wow.
But, you know, he's at the fairgrounds in Pomona. He fills it. And when you talk to, you know, he had a pilot at ABC. And I remember when we were doing Christella, I met him because we were doing Christella. And he agreed to be on half the episodes because he wanted to learn how to do television. And we had to call ABC and have a campaign about how popular he was. Because they were like, we don't know who this is. And we were like, well, he has kiosks in malls. You know, when you go to a mall and there's like a kiosk that sells candy, when you go to the mall in El Monte, there's a Gabriel kiosk. Like, do you understand this? And finally they agreed, but really, really kicking and screaming. So we always knew he had this audience, and it was just about getting the horsepower from that engine to the tires and finding someone that would agree with us. And, you know, Netflix, Andy Weil was a champion of it.
Mark, when you're casting superheroes, I mean, is there a superhero type? Because some of the actors play superheroes and you go, my God, that's the complete embodiment of everything we thought. And other actors, it's kind of like, how do you find the arrow? How do you find the essence of those?
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, it helps. It helps. You know, it really does start with a great casting director, and you know, Dave Rappaport and Lindsay Baldessari, who basically have cast the entire Arrowverse. You know, they've cast all those shows. They find us the right people. I mean, you know, the leads on Flash, Supergirl, and Arrow were all cast with the very first actor that David and Lindsay brought to the producers.
Wow.
And that's not because it's like, okay, great, we saw someone, we'll cast them. It's like they brought their first choice first, and their first choice was perfect. You know, though, you know, it's funny, like when we started, you know, and we were casting Arrow, it's my first time casting a CW show. And I'll be honest, there were so many pretty people walking in and out of the office. I'm like, am I casting a show or a eugenics program? Like, it was kind of surreal. But the truth is, like, you know, some of these superheroes, the men and the women, they have a certain build, you know, they you know, because there's a physicality to these roles that they have to be able to embody. And you can, you know, you can do certain things with padded suits and you can do certain things with lifts and everything. But at the end of the day, you know, you're casting them for a variety of different things, but their ability to at least present on camera as physically, you know, prominent, you know, is definitely an element in the whole analysis.
Marta, I want to talk to you about something that just stayed with me. I mean, I go to a lot of different events. I was at the Film Threat Academy Awards party the year they did Babe Pig in the Woods. And I only remember that because they served roast pig. And a very kind of modest sedan pulls up and your 3 stars walk out, all of the girls. And I thought, this is like season 4 of the show and someone's driving a Toyota. I'm right away interested. And I watched them for the evening, not in a creepy stalker way. They were actually friends. And I'm wondering, did you see that when you cast them, that there was a chemistry or potential? Is that something that grew? Is that something that how did that magic happen? Because there were at least 10 other knockoffs of your show and none of them worked.
Let me say a couple of things. First of all, I agree wholeheartedly with Mark. the casting director is crucial.
Mhm.
You don't always know. I have to say, the moment that I realized the casting was correct was the first scene that we rehearsed where they were all on stage at the same time, where they're all on set together. And I kind of went, holy crap, got to chill up my spine. And I mean, and it just, they were great together. And we didn't cast it thinking about, is this one going to be good with this one? We didn't do chemistry reads. And we were casting until the very, very last minute and took a number of chances on a couple of actors where we weren't in first position, which was quite a risk. But as soon, and there's always that fear when you cast a pilot, they're going to have to replace somebody because, oh my God, they just, and thank God it was one of those things that we were like, yep, that's them. That's them. We don't have to go any further. And it was, as you said, it was magic. I mean, I wish I could take credit for that magic, but I can't.
Talk to me about chemistry reads. How do those work?
Honestly, so you've cast someone, and then you're casting another person who is opposite them. Probably the person you cast has a bigger name or more of a heavy hitting career. And they want to know that the person that they're going to be opposite feels right to them. And you want to know, especially if they're supposed to be attracted to each other, that there is literally chemistry there. And I think it only works 50% of the time. And the good news is they are actors and can fake it.
Yes. I have a quick story about one of the 50% that worked. That is my favorite story of last year. We were casting a romantic lead for Gabriel, and he's a big guy. And we got to figure out how that's going to work. And so we bring in a lot of noted actors, and we get down to our final three. And then Kevin and I get an email from stage that our costumer wants to read. And Gabe said it was okay. So immediately as an executive producer, my first thought is I have to go protect Gabe. He said yes to this person, and this person's way out of line, and I got to go protect Gabe, right? So I head on down there and I run into him and I say, I can make that go away in a second. And he goes, no, I think you should let Laura read. And I go, can everyone handle this though? Because, this is unusual and strange and weird, and it's probably not going to work, and there's going to be hurt feelings. And has she done anything? And he said, she's acted in college. And I said, okay, well, I don't know how this is going to go, but if you're giving me the okay, then we'll have her read. So she came in to the network test after our three big candidates, and she destroyed it. And to the point where I almost had tears in my eyes, and you're in front of all these people and you're like, I have to now figure out how to make a case for her or dance out of here. And so I said, well, she's absolutely earned a role on the show. Like if we want to have a teacher, like for somebody to be in 6 episodes, I don't know, but da-da-da-da. And Gabe goes, well, could we do something like this? And she's in our show now, and she's tremendous. And the reason why she doesn't have a resume is, in her own words, she goes, I was never fat enough to be the fat girl or thin enough to be the thin girl. And my mama was a costumer. And so I've been working as a costumer.
Wow.
But she's studying acting, and she's great.
That's amazing.
Great.
Yeah.
Let's
And-
talk about
Sorry.
let's talk about what you're all developing in the future. I saw that you guys have 2 projects to do with college students. Is that intentionally an area you're going to go into, or? You're
No,
looking like no.
no. We have a development deal at the studio and have been looking at many, many projects. And one project is a book adaptation that does take place on a college campus called The Dreamers, which
Mhm.
is ironically about a pandemic that was pitched before the pandemic.
Hmm.
And then we have another project for Disney Plus, which is Tweens, neither of which was chosen because of the age of the characters, but more because we are passionate about the projects.
Okay.
We also
What-
have, another thing that some of it takes place on a college campus is based on a book called We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves.
Yeah.
And it is certainly not about college or the college experience in any way. It just happens to take place there.
All I have to go on is IMDb Pro. I do my best. I'm a journalist, but I
I
don't.
mean, even the Dreamers one, although it takes place in a college town, it's not really just about
College,
college in any way.
right?
You have anything else in development
Yeah,
you
we
want to
do.
talk about?
I don't know. I mean, we have like 3 other projects that are in various stages of development. We have, well, I'm going to talk about this one. We have a project in development called Queer Habits, which is based on a true story about an order of drag queen nuns.
Who solve crime?
No, they don't solve crime, but what they did do, a couple of them went to an area, a very red area of California, and started their own little order there. And it's about these, drag queens trying to help,
Community.
a Trump town.
That sounds great.
Sounds
By the way, I don't see any reason why they couldn't solve crimes. I'm giving this to you for free.
Look, Mark, those can be B stories, Mark, just to keep the tension.
Right, exactly. Just think about it.
All right, I'll think about it.
Well, my years in the Catholic girls' school, that's definitely now on the top of my list of what I hope you get on the air. Mark, what are you doing?
Right now, I'm working on Green Lantern for HBO Max with Greg. We're having a blast. Actually, right before this, I was working on the script for the first episode, which I'm co-writing with Seth Graham-Smith, and Seth is, he's fantastic. He's very much cut from the same cloth as I am, and we really see things. We see the world the same way. And the other TV project is I'm developing a continuation / reimagination of LA Law for ABC. And this is my thank you. This is my literal dream project.
That's so great.
So fun.
I am. I like to, I like to say. I always quote a line from episode 521: "As fond as you are of your obsession, you're going to want to play that down." The cast would be very justified in taking a restraining order out on me. But I'm really, really excited. I'm writing that with Oba Muhammad, who I worked with on Legends and Arrow. So she and I now go way back, and we have a great shorthand, and she's fantastic, and we're having a blast working together.
Great. What about you, Peter?
Well, my Amazon pilot is adult animation, and it's co-created with Isaac Gonzalez, who I worked with on Mr. Iglesias, and Eric Rivera, who's stand-up. And it's about a nice guy Latino who thinks he's in Hollywood, but he's really in Van Nuys. And he is visited by Cricket, who's this pretty not PC tattooed angel from the east side of heaven who's here to make him an authentic Mexican because he thinks Ricky's lost his balls. And so we're doing that for Amazon. And I'm very excited about that. We're starting to go out to artists right now. And they asked us to write a second episode script. So who knows when that'll happen or not. And this last year, when I switched agents to Verve, they've been so great because CAA's kept me in that comedy lane because I guess I was making them dimes and dollars. And Verve said, what do you want to do? And I have a 1 hour with Blumhouse that we're about to take out. That is a period Western set in the 1850s
Wow.
about my ancestor, Joaquin Murrieta, who was a bandit during the gold rush, who was a freedom fighter. And it's like a dream project to write. And as Mark said, you don't want to lead with your passion, but it's hard to get in that room and see that slide deck with my name on it, and then a guy with a gun, and go, yeah, let's go, you know.
Right.
So that's what I'm working on right now.
Well,
Awesome.
that's incredible. I want to thank you all. This has really been exciting. And I got to finally meet you, Marta, because you've been one of my heroes forever.
Well,
And the rest of you are all wonderful too. But thank you very, very much. I cannot wait to see what you all do next. And I appreciate you sharing this with our audience.
Well, thank you.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.